because, as you know, prayer always ends with, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever." Amen. I went to bed feeling pretty well connected to the universe for a long time.
You're putting me on, right?
Oh, no, not at all. I belong to the whole big scheme of things. I live and work and hide my being in the family store. The whole universe is a powered family enterprise.
So, do you still believe in Howard?
Let me put it this way. 13th century Christian mystic Meister Eckhart once said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me."
What the heck is that supposed to mean?
Not only do I believe in Howard, but Howard, he believes in me.
There's a bench in the city where I live. Its structure is simple, 3 slabs of smooth gray granite. And having checked with a compass to be certain, I can tell you that this bench has been carefully placed so that the long sides face east and west, and the short ends point north and south. This sturdy seat has been placed with purpose on the highest ground of the highest hill in the city, so that when the sky is clear on a summer's morning, you can see almost 60 miles in 3 directions. This bench is, in fact, a tombstone in a cemetery, and I would take you there to sit if I could. You wouldn't feel uncomfortable sitting on it, I promise. You wouldn't even notice what it was at first. It's right on the edge of the paved lane that curves to the burial grounds. It's placed so that you are clearly invited to use it. The placement of the bench, the consciousness of the view, all say that someone went to a lot of trouble to be useful and dead. A parting gesture of quiet generosity has been made. Funerals have a certain narcissism to them, a focus on self, what I want for my funeral, and what I want for my epitaph. A very human holding on to identity as long as breath and granite last. But to me, tombstones are markers of loneliness. But this bench is another story, unique. First of all, there's no name inscribed on it, no conventional epitaph, no dates, just an open invitation to sit and think. What marks this grave is the gift of silent companionship that bridges loneliness. This bench has become a spiritual retreat for me throughout the years, and I know that I am not the only one to use it, because once I found a note taped under it, not for me, for a young woman from a young man who was in love with her and wrote her careless poetry with great passion. And no, I'm not sorry I snooped. And yes, I put it back as I found it. And no, I didn't hide in the bushes and wait and see who came for the note. Secret lovers have enough problems as it is. But it was on this bench, the summer morning after one of those milestone birthdays, that I crossed over from the abstract intellectual knowledge that all human beings die to the active realization that I will die. Me. I will not be. Sooner or later. Not only did I realize that I will die, but I walked away thinking, well, it's okay. I connect that moment of enlightenment with the peculiar sanctuary of this bench and whoever provided it. This bench will last hundreds of years. Many people will sit here and think not of the name of its owner, but of the nameless joys of this sweet life and the mystery of death and how utterly amazing it all is. And that somehow Sometimes things are just as they should be.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions?
What is the meaning of life?
I beg your pardon?
What is the meaning of life?
Are you kidding me?
Well, who knows? You may have the answer, and I'd really hate to miss it because I was too socially inhibited to ask.
Once.
And only once.
I asked that question,
What is the meaning
What is
of
the
life?
meaning of
What is the meaning of life? And got a serious answer. An answer that is still with me. The place where this happened has a distinct power of its own. On the Greek island of Crete, in a small village on a rocky bay, sits an institute dedicated to human understanding and peace, but especially to reconciliation between Germans and the natives of Crete.
The site is important because it overlooks a small airstrip where Nazi paratroopers invaded the island and were attacked by peasants wielding kitchen knives and hay scythes.
The retribution was terrible. Populations of whole villages were lined up and shot for assaulting Hitler's finest troops.
High above the Institute is a cemetery with a single cross marking the mass grave of native partisans. And across the bay is the regimental burial ground of the Nazi paratroopers. The memorials are placed so that all might see and never forget.
Hatred was the only weapon many Greeks had left in the end, and it was the weapon many vowed never to give up.
In this historical place, where the stone of hatred is hard and thick, the existence of an institute devoted to healing the wounds of war is a fragile paradox.
So, how has it come to be here?
The answer is a man. Alexander Papaderos, doctor of philosophy, teacher, politician, son of this soil. At the end of the war, Papaderos came to believe that the people of Crete and those of Germany had much to learn from each other, much to give one another. For if they could forgive and construct a creative relationship, then any people on this earth could.
Well, Papaderos succeeded. The institute became a reality, a conference ground on the side of horror, and a productive source of interaction between the two countries. By the time I came to the institute for summer session, Alexander Papaderos was already a living legend. One look at him and you saw his strength, his intelligence, and his passion.
At the end of the last session of a 2-week seminar, Papaderos rose from his seat in the back of the room and came to the front, where he stood in the bright Greek sunlight of an open window and looked out.
We followed his gaze across the bay to the iron cross marking the German cemetery. He turned and asked,
Are there any questions?
Quiet pulled in the room. These 2 weeks have generated enough questions for a lifetime. But for now, there's only silence.
So I asked, Dr. Papaderos, what is the meaning of life?
People laughed at the absurdity of the question, and they stirred to go.
He raised his hand and stilled the room.
I will answer the question.
He fished into his pocket and pulled out a very small round mirror.